paperwork and it said he's a child molester, you would have to kill him or you would get killed. That's how it works. There's no way around it.
There is no mercy for sex offenders in prison. Some of the most brutal violence I saw was against sex offenders.
Why don't you just go ahead and tell us what happened? All right, I guess he decided to clear his conscience or something, but, he told me what he was in prison for, that he had, was accused of raping an 11-year-old girl, and he got 25 to life for it, and, I told him that. So now if I don't want to hear anymore, I first, punched him a couple times. Still wouldn't shut up. Still kept telling me he wanted to explain that he didn't do it, that he was being sent up and all this stuff. And I don't know, I just got mad and then hit him and then I killed him. When I hit him and knocked him out, and then I took the shoelaces out of his shoes, tied them together, wrapped it around his neck, and then strangled him. Then after I was done, I was aware of what I was doing, and then I just put him on his bed and covered him up and climbed in my bed and went to sleep. I noticed, we've been in your cell, and that it appears that all of your belongings you packed up. Yep. Okay. Well, when did you do that? Right after I knew he was dead. Right after you knew. So, and the reason for doing that would be because when you go to the hole, that's usually what the police do to back it up. And I figured, they're going to tear my shit up. So, okay, let me just do it myself. So what happened to the shoelaces? Flushed them down the toilet. Okay. Now, those laces came out of Ted's shoes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then when you were done, you flushed it down the toilet. Mm-hmm. Why would you do that? Because I'm an idiot. I don't know. Obviously I don't think right. I'm in prison for most of my life, so my thinking isn't really rational. I don't know. I just kind of thought that was the appropriate thing to do at that time. Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I know murdering somebody's not a good thing, but Jesus, man, if the things this guy did, things he said he did, I wouldn't want someone like that on the street again. So I do what's necessary. I do what some people won't. You guys are cops. You arrest people all the time for stuff that you wish you could shoot them in the face. I already know that. I'm not stupid. There's crimes that shouldn't be committed. So, I just don't have any empathy for people. So basically, what you did, you figure Ted got what he deserved. Ben got what he deserved. I believe that with all my heart. Look, I hit him a couple times, and I pulled the chair back and sat in the chair, and then and kind of got up posturing on me. That's kind of like me. He got up like, So I was like, okay, and then I called him again, and when he went down, I was like, that sucks to be you. I just don't think stabbing or shooting somebody is a little too personal. If you're going to kill somebody, you might as well be personal about it, right? You think that's more personal? Yeah, I know it sounds kind of crazy, but if you have to go to that extent, I want it to be personal.
So many people talk about it, but is it real? What happens to prisoners that walk in the door with the label of being Cho-Mos? In many cases, they start to lie immediately, or they say, my lawyer told me not to talk about it. When they say that, the bells begin to ring, and any prisoner with any sense knows that they are there for diddling with kids. Immediately, they have a target on their back. People who commit crimes against children are known to suffer harsh treatment from other prisoners while incarcerated. While all criminal offenses are condemned, prisoners reportedly consider the most heinous crimes to be offenses against children. So Cho-Mos definitely have a hard time behind bars. Many of them end up dead. Today, we take a look at what really happens in federal and state prisons to society's troubled demons. We give you the top 5 Chos that have been destroyed. Number 1. At a federal prison in Milan, Michigan, one man's nightmares would become true. Christian Marie, at the age of 40 years old, was sentenced to 40 years in prison. His crimes? One sick dude. From 2012 through 2017, with other men both inside and outside of the United States, he would work together to lure juvenile girls to an unmonitored video chat website and then exploit them. Christian was the leader of the group. The men recruited the victims from common social media platforms by pretending to be teenage boys interested in chatting with the girls in real time. Once the victims arrived in the rooms, the group, all pretending to be teenagers, would work together to build trust and convince the children to engage in explicit conduct on web cameras. Group members then recorded that activity. When cops busted into his house, his wife and 2 children looked on in shock that the cops could somehow be in their house, whisking away the person they believed was a husband, a father, a law-abiding citizen. They would whisk him away to what would be the place he would leave his blood, on the razor wire. Christian, the 40-year-old co-founder of a computer graphics company from Binghamton, New York, would never see Binghamton ever again. He was on his way to the Eastern District of Michigan to be prosecuted and eventually killed for his crimes. Alex Sniper Castro, who was 39 years old at the time, Jason J. Cachigo, 38, Adam Creeper Wright, 39, were all in the same prison with Christian, who was only Christian by name. They began to plot on the Cho-Mos in their housing unit. Their plan was to kill and destroy as many sex offenders as they could until the cops could stop them. The men would meet in a cell and discuss how they would take the lives of Christian and others, charged with the same crimes as him. They targeted the smallest and the weak, the ones that they figured would not be much of a problem, so that they could move on to their next victims. But because Christian was the leader, and they had newspaper articles outlining what he had done, he was the first target of the angry men bent on becoming killing machines. But he would not be the only person targeted from the same sex ring. The men had eyes on Michael's co-defendants as well. On January 2nd, 2019, the men would ring the new year in their way. They would go into Christian's cell and close the door behind them. Christian knew when the door slammed that all the stories he had heard about what happened to people like him in prison was now coming true. He would try to flee, but when he did, Jay Cachigo would grab him, and then the fight for life or death would begin. Armed with prison shanks, the men would repeatedly beat and stab the SO until he would take his last breath. Christian would scream, yell, and try to fight back, but he had been marked by death itself. This was his fate, and there was no getting out of it. He was stabbed multiple times, and when the men had finished, they would throw him down the stairs for other prisoners and staff to see. Next, they set their sights on Christian's co-defendant, Michael Figueroa. Figueroa, a computer IT specialist at a college in Pennsylvania, had recently been sentenced to 31 years for his transgressions, and he had just witnessed his confederate take his last breath. He seen the men lock onto him as their next prey, and he would run, only to be caught. He, too, would receive the blunt force of the prison shank as the men began to butcher him and beat him. When it was all done, he would live, but now he was able to feel what it was like to be victimized. When they thought they had inflicted the maximum amount of damage, they would turn their sights to Joseph Raphael, and he too would feel the same wrath. And then they would attack another prisoner, Craig Evans. As the prison guards attempted to save Figueroa, Evans, and Raphael, the men would attack prison guards with fury so that they can continue their assault on the Cho-Skis. When it was done, one Cho-Ski would die and 3 others would come close to losing their lives. On that day, they realized that God's children were not for sale, and that there were other prisoners willing to extract revenge on men like them. In the end, Alex Albert Castro, at 42 years old, a resident of Fontana, California, would plead guilty to second-degree murder. He would come before a federal judge and be sentenced to another 28 years in prison. But that sentence was a joke. It meant little to the 42-year-old man who was already serving 42 years in federal prison. In 2022, Wright would also plead guilty to second-degree murder and be sentenced to over 24 years of imprisonment. Jay Cachigo, the man who opened that can of whip ass, was convicted at trial of second-degree murder and sentenced to 28 years of imprisonment. Prosecutors would say, "This savage crime deserves the most serious of consequences. My office is committed to preventing violence wherever it occurs. These convictions show that we will not turn a blind eye to this type of conduct and will aggressively prosecute violence within our prisons." But Mr. Prosecutor, what about the violence committed on the kids? Is it simply rectified by 40-year prison sentences? Number 2, there must be something in the water in Michigan, because on October 29th, Stephen D. Sadinson, already serving life for murdering his girlfriend and with nothing to lose, would kill 67-year-old Theodore Dyer at the Sangwa Correctional Facility. Dyer had been sentenced to 25 to 50 years for being an actual diddler and victimizing a 9-year-old. Sanderson would detail what he did and why he did what he did to the 67-year-old at his sentencing. The reason I killed him was because he was a chomo, Sanderson would say. If it's all right, Judge, I can tell you where it all started. That night, he was trying to justify why he did it, and I told him to keep quiet and that he'd have to leave in the morning, find a new cell. But he continued to talk about it, try to justify it. So he was a little bit bigger than me, Judge, so I got down and I hit him in his face a few times. When he fell, I wrapped a cord around his neck, and that's when I took his life. Some people stood by shocked in the courtroom. Others acted shocked, and many likely were happy that the 67-year-old left his blood on the razor wire at Saginaw Correctional Facility. God's children are not to be sold or victimized. Sanderson would say, God is the only judge. I just set the appointment up. Number 3. One of the wildest payback assaults would happen in England just a few years ago. Richard William Huckle was an English serial offender. He was arrested by Britain's National Crime Agency in 2014 after a tip-off from the Australian Federal Police and convicted in 2016 of 71 charges against children. The enormity of the charges against him has led to him being described by the press as Britain's most depraved pedo. On June 2016, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 25 years before he would be eligible for parole. And he would at one time create what he dubbed the pedophile manual. But would he ever see the parole board? That would never happen. His only parole board would come before the devil. On October 13, 2019, Huckle, at the age of 33 years old, was subject to a prolonged torture, murder in which he was tied up, beaten, strangled, assaulted in the worst ways, and repeatedly stabbed. A blade was lodged in his brain via his nose. On January 13, 2020, a fellow inmate, 29-year-old Paul Fitzgerald, was charged with his murder. Fitzgerald, who had several previous convictions for violent and other sexual offenses, was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 34 years on November 24, 2020. Number 4, Maine State Prison, an absolute psycho. Inmate Richard Starsky, who we interviewed here on Blood on the Razor Wire, would make another predator his victim of violence. With victimization running wild in his family when he was young, Richard would lash out with a prison shank in February 2014. Richard would take the life of Micah Boland after stabbing him 87 times. After the attack, Richard, bloody and full of sweat, appeared before a prison guard after a long drink, holding the weapon of destruction in his bloody hands, and he told her he needed to be handcuffed. Boland's 22-year sentence for assaulting a 4-year-old had finally come to an end. After Richard had took the life of his fellow inmate, investigators would find a list in his cell with 5 other prisoners' names on them, all SOs. Staff at the prison have said that they believe Richard has mental health issues and was bent on being the definition of what a convict is supposed to be. Richard was living a movie. Starsky was already serving multiple sentences for elevated aggravated assault and aggravated assault for attacking other prisoners with makeshift knives. He was also convicted of arson and assaulting an officer. When he admitted to what he had done, he simply stated, "I am guilty of this." Yeah, absolutely. I get stupid sometimes when I have a knife in my hand. In prison, everyone who commits these crimes could end up on the list of someone like Richard. Number 5, Jonathan Watson, no relation to Wes. A 41-year-old California inmate serving a life sentence for murder confessed in a letter that he had beat to death 2 child molesters with another inmate's cane hours after a prison counselor ignored his urgent warning that he might become violent. In a letter that he penned to the Bay Area News Group, Watson, 41 years old, said he clubbed both men in the head on January 16, 2020 at the California Substance Abuse Treatment Facility and State Prison in the small Central California city of Cochran. The first attack occurred after Watson became enraged that one of the sex offenders was watching a children's television show. Prisoner David Bobb, 48, would die that day. Graham D. Lewis Conte, 62, would die 3 days later at a hospital. Both were serving life sentences for assaulting young victims under 14. Days before that attack, Watson said his security classification was changed, and he was transferred from a single-person cell to a lower security dormitory pod at the Central Valley facility. Watson called the switch a careless mistake and said he left quite a paper trail protesting it. Watson, who was serving a life sentence for a 2009 murder conviction, wrote that 6 days after he arrived at the prison, a Cho-Moski moved into the pod. Watson believed the man began taunting other inmates by watching children's television programming. Watson would say, I could not sleep having not done what every instinct told me I should have done right then and there. So I packed all of my things because I knew one way or another, the situation would be resolved the following day. 2 hours before the attacks, the next day, Watson told a prison counselor that he urgently needed to be transferred back to a higher level of security before I really fuck one of these dudes up. But the counselor scoffed and dismissed him, resulting in the death of two of society's worst. Watson said he returned to his housing pod. I was mulling it all over when along came molester number one, and he put his TV right on PBS Kids again. But this time, someone else said something to the effect of, is this guy really going to watch this right in front of us? And I recall saying, don't worry, don't trip, I got this. And I picked up the cane and went to work on him. Watson said he then left the housing pod to find a guard and turn himself in. But on the way, he saw a known child trafficker, and I'd figured I'd just do everybody a favor. In for a penny, in for a pound. What happens when these offenders face men that have nothing to lose? They leave their blood on the razor wire. God's children are not for sale. God's children are not for sale. What does that mean? Think about it. You know, the reason I did this video is because I went to see that movie last week, Sounds of Freedom, right? You've seen the thumbnail. And it was pretty deep, man. I can't say that there was a dry eye in the place when you walked out of there. And people need to understand that, you know, these people are off limits. Like, they are. These are innocent victims. And people come out here and you destroy these people and you destroy families. And, you know, there's people that say, well, you know, they've been through it in their lives and that's why they're doing this. You need to understand what the consequences are. This 40-year-old dude from Binghamton, New York, I don't like to say he's from, you know, New York, but he is. You know, father, husband, got all kinds of money, owns this computer company, living his best life, but behind closed doors, he's diddling on the computer. Never ever in his life did he think that he would probably get caught. Never did he ever think that he would be in a, you know, what's Milan, an FCI? Never did he think he'd be in an FCI or a low and end up losing his life there. Never did he think that, you know, there's cats coming from all over the place, like from California, and I believe these cats were Southsiders, some of them. And they would destroy you. They got 42 years. Dude's got 42 years. He's never getting out anyway, and if he does, he gets out when he's 85. Why not just, you know, finish you off, right? There are people like this in prison. I've been around people that are like, yo, I don't care, I'm never getting out. What can they do to me? You know, in federal prison, what are they going to do? Put you in the ADX and give you a television? Yeah, it hurts probably to be in the ADX. But some of these dudes just don't care. Like, I'd rather be in ADX alone. Different personalities. Some people like to be alone. I'd rather be in the ADX alone with a television, man. And I'm about to take this cat out. Or some of them cats like, man, I don't care if I end up in Terre Haute. Go ahead, stick me on death row. I don't care. And some of these dudes like Richard, who I interviewed on this channel, absolutely nuts. You know, Richard would make you a victim. If he didn't like you, he'd drum something up in his mind, and he's going to victimize you. And we ended up posting those pictures on the Discord. I don't even think the Discord's up anymore. I'm not sure. I don't really run it. But we had put those pictures over there of what he did. Some of the most brutal pictures you'll ever see from any type of prison assault. Those were the pictures that we put over there. They were from Richard, and they were part of his discovery. So just think about this. Today, if you're even involved in anything like this, you should probably go watch that, you know, movie Sounds of Freedom. And you should probably change your course, because you could end up like Christian. And I said he's not a Christian by anything but name. I don't know what he did when he got to prison, or just a vicious dude, right? These people are vicious. They do vicious things. They victimize people. And when they victimize people, there's a price to pay. There's a price to pay. Don't think that when you get to prison that the cops are going to protect you. How do the cops treat them, Chad? You want to know the truth? The cops will put your ass out there. They'll pull your stuff up right on the computer and show it to the other prisoners. Yep, this is PSR. A lot of those cops have kids. A lot of those cops in there, not all of them, but a large majority of them are feeling the same way that most of society is feeling about people like you, if you're one of those people. They're like, yo, dude right there, get him out of here. They don't want you to be around either. They don't like you. So if you're doing this stuff, it's probably time to quit, man. Or end up in the position that these dudes are in. Could you imagine 3 or 4 gang members chasing you around a unit with a shank? Could you imagine what it's like to feel that first one go into your back? Could you imagine what it's like for 3 dudes to come in your cell and close the door and you have no way out? It hurts. It hurts before you take your last breath. Blood on the Razor Wire TV, if you haven't, go check out the movie Sounds of Freedom. It's a phenomenal movie, and it's something that I think everybody should watch. With respect, until tomorrow, I hope you like this one. We're out.